This story follows a boy who gains a unique superpower, the ability to make others feel exactly what he feels. But will he be able to use this power wisely? Stay tuned to find out. The story begins with an old man standing near a grave performing a ritual. As he continues, he suddenly experiences a powerful jolt that sends him flying backward. When he regains his footing, he realizes that his ritual is complete. He has gained extraordinary powers. The scene then shifts, introducing us to the movie's main character, Kali. Kali suffers from a strange condition. He has a habit of eating paper. One day, he goes shopping, where he unexpectedly runs into his classmates. As he interacts with them, a girl from his childhood named Dominic arrives to protect him. The boys get angry and, in frustration, pick up Kaylee and throw him straight into a garbage bin. Just then, Sophie the shop owner appears and chases the boys away. Dominic feels bad for what happened to Kaylee and offers to give him a ride to school. However, her friends refuse, saying that since Kaylee had just been in the trash, they didn't want garbage in their car. When Kaylee reaches school, he discovers that a video of him being thrown into the garbage bin has gone viral. Everyone is making fun of him. Later, when he gets home, his mother asks him how his day went. At first, he tells his mother that he talked to Dominic today. His mother then tells him that they are good friends and that he should ask her out on a date. Perhaps Dominic also likes Kaylee. After this, the scene shifts to the grave where the old man had received his powers. A man arrives there and his name is Riddle. In reality, all the powers belong to his ancestors, and his job was to protect their powers. On the other hand, we see Kaylee, who had a habit of eating paper, and because of this, he had gone sick. His mother had called a doctor to check on him. The doctor tells his mother that Kaylee might have a psychological disorder because there is no male figure in their house, which could be why he is behaving this way. In reality, this doctor had a liking for Kaylee's mother, and because of this, he kept finding ways to be close to her. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to an old man named Pfluger. He gathers people around him and tells them, "I have immense powers. I can heal you all." An elderly woman who had difficulty walking due to severe pain in her legs approaches Pfluger. The old man absorbs all her pain, and suddenly she feels relief. Seeing this, everyone starts praising the old man. Kaylee's mother was watching all of this and began to think that maybe he could help Kali, so she invited him to her home. Rendell overheard this and approached Pfluger, saying, "These powers belong to my ancestors, and you should return them because what you're doing is very dangerous." However, Pfluger refused to give up the powers and says, "I am enjoying these powers a lot, and I will never return them to you." After this, Pfluger goes to Kali's home, but as soon as he touches Kali, he begins to experience a severe headache. When Kali touches him again, the pain intensifies, ultimately leading to Pfluger's death. With Pfluger gone, Kali suddenly starts feeling much better, as all of Pfluger's powers have now transferred into him. The next day, while fixing his bicycle, Kali accidentally gets a cut on his hand. To his surprise, the wound heals instantly on its own. It is at this moment that Kali realizes he has gained extraordinary new powers. Kaylee's mother was preparing to leave for her night shift, but was feeling extremely tired. As Kali hugged her, she suddenly felt a surge of energy and quickly regained her strength. Later, Kaylee heads into town and meets Dominic and her friends. Noticing a change in Kali's demeanor, Dominic comments, "You're acting very differently today." She then adds, "I heard you weren't feeling well." Just then, Rocky appears from behind and starts speaking. Without warning, he punches Kaylee in the stomach, but to everyone's surprise, Kaylee remains completely unaffected. Instead, Rocky himself feels the pain. It becomes clear that anyone who tries to harm Kali will end up hurting themselves instead. Frustrated, Rocky grows even angrier and lands another punch, this time on Kali's face. But once again, the injury rebounds onto him. Witnessing this, Kali feels delighted and taunts Rocky, "Brother, you can hit me whenever you want." Enraged and humiliated, Rocky runs away. That night, filled with excitement, he eagerly shares everything that happened with his mother. Meanwhile, Rocky arrives at Kaylee's home with his father. Rocky's father, looking concerned, says, "Kali has hurt my son." Kali's mother immediately responds, "It wasn't my son who hurt yours. It was your son who attacked mine." Rocky's father nods and admits, "Yes, I know, but what happened today was quite unusual." Frustrated, Kaylee's mother questions him, "If you knew that your son was the one causing harm, why didn't you stop him?" Her anger grows and she firmly asks Rocky's father to leave. After they leave, Kaylee turns to his mother and says, "Mom, I wanted to tell you this earlier." To prove his point, he asks her to pinch him. When she does, she unexpectedly feels the pain herself. Shocked, Kaylee's mother says, "You should test your abilities further. Try different things to understand the extent of your powers. See if fire can harm you." Kali follows her suggestion and places his hand over a flame, but to their amazement, his skin remains unscathed. This confirms that Kali feels no pain. Realizing the significance of this discovery, they decide to keep it a secret from everyone. Next day, he goes to school and while studying, sees Dominic's hairband on her desk. He starts fantasizing about Dominic being with him and her friend Sarah too. Now something strange happens whatever he was feeling in his fantasies. Dominic and Srara also starts feeling that. The heat, the closeness of the bodies in the climax. Callie quickly exits the class. Later that night, all the students are partying. Dominic's ex-boyfriend arrives and lifts her from behind. Kaylee tells him to put her down, to which Nelson replies, "What are you going to do to me?" Here, Nelson is about to harm Kaylee, but the Rocky's father Gus arrive and stop him. Rocky arrives angrily and says, "I will find out what's going on with you." The party ends, and Kaylee is riding his bicycle home. On the way, Nelson and his friends see him and try to harm him. Kaylee loses his balance and falls under a vehicle. Due to the opposite effect, the driver of the vehicle dies instantly. Kaylee is seriously injured. Dominic and his friends arrive at the scene. Kaylee tells Dominic the whole truth about the events that transpired. Shortly after, the police arrive, along with Kaylee's mother, to investigate the death of the driver. The police question everyone about what happened, and all the boys accuse Kaylee of riding his bicycle on the road and trying to cause an accident. However, the officer doesn't believe these accusations and approaches Kaylee directly. Kaylee tries to explain everything that happened, but the police still don't believe him. Since it seems to be an accident, the case is ultimately closed. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Riddle, who is seen visiting Pfluger's grave. He casts a spell on the plants near the grave, hinting at something supernatural. On the other side, at school, the boys are keeping an eye on Kaylee, seeking revenge for the death of their friend, the driver of the car. After this, Kaylee and Dominic are sitting together when Dominic mentions that a new movie has just been released. She hints that maybe Kaylee will ask her out on a date. At first, Kaylee doesn't quite understand, but eventually he gathers the courage to ask Dominic out, and she agrees. Later, as Kaylee is working, Riddle arrives to meet him. He asks Kaylee, "Do you know Pfluger?" Kaylee explains everything to him, and Riddle soon realizes that Kaylee has acquired Pfluger's powers. That night, when Kaylee returns home, he finds that his mother has a headache. Concerned, he decides to go out and buy some medicine for her. Meanwhile, outside, some of his so-called friends are keeping an eye on his house. They assume that Kaylee's mother has left, and that Kaylee is alone inside. Taking advantage of the situation, they tie Kaylee's trailer to their vehicle and pull it down. As a result, the trailer crashes, causing a gas leak. Inside the house, Kaylee's mother struggles desperately to escape. She tries her best to get out, but is unable to do so. Meanwhile, a lamp falls to the ground, sparking a fire that quickly spreads. The fire leads to an explosion, and tragically, Kaylee's mother loses her life. By the time Kaylee arrives, the situation is completely out of control. The police, assuming that Kaylee has suffered severe burns in the explosion, take him to the hospital. However, later, the officers discover that Kaylee is completely unharmed, with no injuries whatsoever. At this point, Riddle arrives to meet the sheriff. He tells the officer, "The powers of our ancestors have now been transferred to Kaylee. We need to do something about this." However, the officer dismisses his concerns and refuses to pay attention to him. In the next scene, we see Kaylee's mother's funeral. Kaylee stands solemnly, mourning her loss. Dominic comes to support Kaylee during this difficult time, offering him comfort. After everyone leaves, Kaylee goes to Pfluger's grave. He notices a leaf on top of it, picks it up, and eats it. However, shortly after, he begins vomiting uncontrollably. Sarah, standing at a distance, witnesses everything unfold. After Kaylee's mother's death, the officers decide to place him in hostile care for his own safety. On the way there, one of the officers asks Kaylee, "Was there a problem with your trailer?" The balance seemed off. Just then, Kaylee spots Nelson and his friends on the road and immediately realizes that they were responsible for the accident that led to his mother's death. Without hesitation, Kaylee jumps out of the car and begins chasing them. Nelson and his friends flee toward a riverbank. When Kaylee arrives at the riverbank, he grabs one of their shirts, wraps it around his neck, and starts tightening it. However, instead of harming himself, the boy who owned that shirt begins to suffocate. He struggles to breathe, and despite his friends' desperate attempts to save him, he ultimately drowns in the water. Kaylee then steps forward, looking at the remaining three, and coldly says, "Now only you three are left, and I won't spare any of you." Meanwhile, the officers searching for Kaylee arrive at the scene. Upon seeing them, Kaylee quickly flees. Later, Nelson informs everyone about Kaylee's strange and dangerous powers, making it clear that Kaylee is not to be underestimated. Dominic then confronts Kaylee and speaks to him, struggling to believe that Kaylee could kill anyone. Kaylee takes Dominic aside and reveals the entire truth to her. Dominic, clearly upset, responds, "You can't just go around killing people like this. If your mother were alive, she would have told you the same thing." Kaylee, looking conflicted, replies, "If she were alive, she wouldn't want this. There must be another way to make them confess on their own." Dominic encourages him to think of a different way, and Kaylee begins to consider an alternative approach. The next day, during class, Kaylee mocks mocks Nelson and his friends. One of Nelson's friends is about to attack Kaylee, but Nelson stops him. Kaylee continues to provoke them, making the tension grow. Later, while in the chemistry lab, one of Nelson's friends accidentally throws acid in another friend's face. The friend's face burns severely, and he dies instantly. Dominic is furious with Kaylee, storming off in anger. Kaylee, frustrated and feeling misunderstood, leaves as well. That night, Sarah meets with Nelson, telling him, "I also want revenge for my friend." Since she knows Kaylee's weakness, she shares the information with Nelson. The two of them gather leaves from Pfluger's grave, the source of Callie's powers, and extract their liquid form. They fill it into gas cans, preparing to use it against Callie. The next day, while everyone is practicing on the field, an officer arrives to warn them. At the same time, Callie shows up with a drilling machine in hand. He tells Nelson, "Tell everyone what you did," but Nelson refuses to confess. In response, Kaylee begins drilling into himself, transferring all the injuries to Nelson's body. Dominic arrives just as the situation escalates. Meanwhile, Nelson uses the liquid mixture to spray Callie with it. Before things get worse, Gus takes advantage of the distraction and grabs the officer's gun. As Kaylee starts to recover, Gus shoots him. The shot has the opposite effect, and both Gus and Nelson die due to the resulting pain. Dominic, heartbroken, says, "You shouldn't have taken revenge like this." Sheriff responds, "This is all happening because of your powers. I can help you return to normal." Kaylee, too, wants to return to a normal life. That night, they all go to a ritual site where Riddle is about to perform a ceremony to strip Callie of his powers. Callie begins to feel intense pain, and Riddle explains that Callie's powers have been within him for a long time. To rid him of them, he would have to sacrifice his life. Upon hearing this, Dominic quickly urges Callie to run, and everyone becomes frightened. To prevent their escape, one of the men shoots at them, and Dominic is injured. Before dying, she tells Callie, "Don't ever give your powers to anyone." Callie is consumed with rage, so Sheriff shoots him in the head, killing him. Sheriff asks Riddle, "Have you gained the powers?" But Riddle replies, "No." Later, we see that when Dominic and Callie's bodies are being carried away, Dominic suddenly wakes up. Kaylee's powers have now transferred to her, and she is ready to take revenge on everyone. And the movie ends with this chilling scene.